Hello everyone. Ravnica Allegiance, the latest set in Magic the Gathering Arena, is coming on the 25th of January. I can't wait to jump back into the game. I played it for about a month, 2 months, a while ago consistently, and it was really fun. Now that I've gotten over the PS4 and all those nasty exclusive games, I've decided to take a look at the upcoming cards. There should be around 250 new cards. I went through all of them and picked out the ones that got me the most excited, and honestly the ones I'm looking most forward to, because in card games, new cards are always incredibly exciting because they open up more and more strategies you can explore, and let's just get into it. There's going to be timestamps in the description box, and I'm also going to link you to the full list of cards if you want to take a look yourself, if you think I managed to miss something. And honestly, if you don't find one of the cards you're looking forward to in this review, feel free to point it out in the comments because I'd love to see it. I definitely could have missed something. Honestly, I just went over them pretty quickly. I've picked out 50, so I should I should be covered, honestly, but still. So, let's start off with the first color, Mono Black. Honestly, I was a bit disappointed because I really like black, so I wanted to like a lot more cards. Maybe that's why I picked out so few. Maybe there are some more decent ones, but I don't think so. So let's start off with the Spawn of Mayhem. 4 mana cost with the new Spectacle. So Spectacle, as it says on the card itself, you may cast this spell for its Spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent has lost life this turn. So the way Magic works is that you have two main phases, and if I understand correctly, this means that if you hit your opponent in the face during your attack phase, in the second phase this creature is going to cost 3 mana instead of 4 mana. So it's a 4/4 creature, flying and trample along with that. So stat-wise, even for 4 mana, it's pretty good. It's not legendary, so you can have 4 of them on the field, which is pretty important when you're talking about creatures. And also, at the beginning of your upkeep, Spawn of Mayhem deals 1 damage to each player, then if you have 10 or less life, put a 1/1 counter on Spawn of Mayhem. So where do I see this card getting played? Most likely aggro decks, because for 3 mana this creature is phenomenal. I don't see why a black aggro deck wouldn't have this creature on. If it's a 2-color deck, it becomes a slight problem because you have 2 black mana and aggro decks don't really want to use non-immediately activated mana, though now we have even extra gates for example Rakdos. But anyway, in an aggro deck, this creature will do really well. Even in a non-aggro deck, why not? It's a mythic, so there aren't going to be that many of them anyway. But pretty amazing that this isn't a legendary, to be honest. Probably should have been. I think this is the best card Mono Black got, honestly, in this expansion. So let's move on to the next guy. Pestilent Spirit, another 3 mana card, technically. It's a 3/2, so already decent enough for 3 mana, but then it also has Menace and Death Touch. So Menace is the mechanic where you need to be blocked by at least 2 creatures, which means this guy can trade 2 for 1 whenever you feel like it, if they want to block him, which is already pretty awesome. And it has Death Touch, so it's definitely going to kill them. That's pretty amazing, honestly. Again, sounds pretty fucking perfect for an aggro deck. Now, he also gives you something else though. Instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. Any amount of damage they deal to a creature is enough to destroy it. So, the important thing to note here is that there aren't that many mono black decks. I've tried playing some zombie decks that work that way, but honestly they weren't that fucking good. So let's try to put this guy in a Rakdos deck, which is like black and red. In a black and red deck, a shock that can kill anyone. Shock is the 2 mana spell that deals the 1 mana spell that deals 2 damage. If you have 4 shocks, you can kill 4 creatures for 4 mana, regardless of their health. What the fuck? So this Pestilent Spirit, along with the Spawn of Mayhem, seem like honestly amazing cards, and the Pestilent Spirit is only rare, so you can get 4 of them whenever you want. I think this is a great card if you're running it in a black and red deck. Most of the black removal spells are just destroy a creature, so it doesn't really have synergy with them. Still a pretty fucking good 3-drop though. Final card for the mono black, it's the Blade Juggler. Just a common card, the lowest rarity, so you would think this isn't that impressive, right? Its regular cost is 5 mana, which is absolutely abysmal. If you ever play this for 5 mana, might as well quit the game. Spectacle cost though is only 3 mana and only 1 black mana out of those 3, so that's pretty amazing. When Blade Juggler enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. What more would you want from a 3-drop in your fucking deck if you're playing aggro? When you play aggro, you run out of cards and you lose the game. If this girl gives you another card, so basically she trades herself out, and she also only costs 3 mana, that's amazing. The 1 damage you're taking in the face you don't care about, you're playing an aggro deck, your HP doesn't matter. When you lose the game, you're going to be usually at around 20 HP anyway. Aggro decks lose when they lose control, not when they lose all their HP. So all 3 of these cards I think would be amazing in an aggro deck. So those are the ones I'm looking forward to in mono black. Now, let's move on to Orzhov, and I've never been so disappointed in my life. Honestly, if you guys find better cards than these in the white and black duo colors, let me fucking know. I was so fucking disappointed. Orzhov got basically nothing in this set. Let's look at the few decent cards they did get. So, Revival and Revenge. Honestly, let's get through Revenge first because I think it's pretty shit. For 6 mana, double your life total, target opponent loses half their life rounded up. At best, this is dealing 10 damage to your opponent. How the fuck is your opponent at 20 HP on the 6th turn, where I assume you would play this? Jesus Christ, this is just awful. Just terrible. Against an aggro deck, if you've survived up to the 6th turn and you can double your life total, how much life do you have left? And Jesus Christ, I can't begin to describe how bad the revenge part of this card is, but the revival part is pretty fucking good because return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this can get a 3-drop back into the battlefield for just 2 mana. And now, the problem obviously with this card is that if you get anything less than a 3-drop, doesn't feel worth it, does it? But the good thing is that there are a lot of good 3-drops, so as long as you look at this card as a comeback mechanic, maybe it can work. Not sure though. You can already tell how underwhelmed I am when this is the first card I'm talking about. Half the card is garbage, the other half is situationally decent. Come on. I think the best part about the revival is that at least it gets the creature back onto the battlefield, and most of the revival cards usually just get it back in your hand and you have to pay the mana again. So I think the revival could be good in an aggro deck, but that's about it. So next card is Seraph of the Scales. What an underwhelming angel card, honestly. For 4 mana, it's a 4/3. Pretty decent already because obviously all angels are flying, and additionally you can pay either 1 white mana or 1 black mana. I assume you can pay both of them. That's my assumption, so it might not work this way. Seraph of the Scales gains vigilance until end of turn, so you can just attack and still block. Why you would want to block with a 4 mana card that has a 4/3 stat line? 3 HP is basically nothing. This can die to a 3-drop. So why you would want to activate the vigilance, I don't fucking know, but whatever. Or you could power it with black mana, and Seraph of the Scales gains Death Touch until end of turn. So you could pay 1 mana to trade 1 for 1. Feels pretty fucking weak. So, this card also has Afterlife too. Afterlife is the shittiest mechanic in this expansion, feels so incredibly boring and weak. When this creature dies, create 2 1/1 white and black spirit creature tokens with flying. So, I guess the idea of Afterlife is to go for evade, but come on. This is so boring and feels so incredibly weak, and this is a mythic. Come on. Finally, Basilica Bellhaunt, 4 mana, but it's difficult 4 mana, as I like to put it, when it asks for very specific 4 mana. When Basilica Bellhaunt, whatever fuck this name, enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card and you gain 3 life. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, discarding a card could be good if your opponent has any cards left, of course, by turn 4. Goddamn aggro decks. And you gain 3 life. Maybe this can work against aggro decks, but what if you can't play this on turn 4? Jesus Christ, imagine playing this on turn 5 or 6. Oh, it feels so weak. Orzhov just got fucked this expansion. Sucks to be Orzhov. On a slightly more uplifting note, let's look at Rakdos, the guild I was so excited about. Honestly, they kind of under-delivered. I had higher expectations, but some of these cards, Jesus Christ. So let's start with the best card Rakdos is getting, Captive Audience. 6 mana, actually 7 mana, Jesus Christ, so expensive. But this card is phenomenal. So, Captive Audience enters the battlefield under the control of an opponent of your choice. So, your opponent is going to get this enchantment. And the fact your opponent gets the enchantment means if they can destroy this, they're about to lose the game in 2 to 3 turns. Let's be generous. Let's say as soon as you play this card, your opponent has 4 turns left to win the game, or they lose. So, they can choose one of the 3 every turn when their turn starts. So immediately when you play it, if they're out of mana, when they're out of mana, so they can't counterspell this, they have to choose one of the 3. Their life total becomes 4, which they're not going to choose. Each opponent creates 5 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, which they aren't going to choose, or discard your hand, which they aren't going to choose. Can you see the problem? Whatever they choose, they lose. So, this card is amazing. I think the weakest part is summoning the zombies, but that's still pretty awesome. And honestly, even if your opponent has to suffer 2 of these conditions, how the fuck are they going to win? Now, the obvious problems with this card is that it's incredibly expensive. You can't run this in an aggro deck, that's fucking ridiculous. So there has to be a Rakdos control deck to go with this card, which I think is doable. It's also not that hard to get 1 black mana and 1 red mana, so you could play this card in a lot of decks that focus on control, obviously, because you aren't getting to 7 mana unless you're playing control or some slow mid-range deck. Anyway, I think this card is the best one for Rakdos, and that's kind of unfortunate because I can see this getting counterspelled and also getting destroyed. There are lots of ways to destroy enchantments, which would feel pretty bad considering you're building towards this the entire game. It's also a mythic, so you won't have more than 1 or 2 of these. Funnily enough, it's not actually a legendary enchantment, so you could play 2 of these for some fucked up reason. I don't know. There seem to be a lot of cards that should have been legendary in this expansion, but whatever. So, next up, Bedevil, or Bedevil, I don't even know. Destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. This describes why I love red and black so much. It's basically fuck any rules, destroy whatever you want to destroy. It might as well say destroy your opponent. Why not? It has a difficult cost of 2 black, 1 red, so you might not always be able to play this right away, but honestly, this card is so powerful, you don't want to play it on the first thing you can play it on. I see this card as a very expensive removal spell, but it can kill anything. Why wouldn't you run this card? It's expensive in a more difficult way to understand why it's expensive, because it's very easy not to draw the kind of lands you need when you're playing 2 colors, but I still think this card has a lot of merit and it's only rare, so you can get pretty much 4 of them easily. So let's move on to the Rakdos Showstopper. Flying Trampo 6/6, 6 mana cost, already decent enough for a 6 drop. When Rakdos the Showstopper enters the battlefield, Flip a coin for each creature that isn't demon, devil, or imp. Destroy each creature whose coin comes up tails. I think this card is hilarious. Honestly, if I got it, I would run it immediately just for the lows, because it can cause some amazing moments and some underwhelming moments. Also, every time a new demon enters the game, always remember that card, I think that's mono black, that says if you control 4 demons with different names, you win the game. So, there are some upsides to this card. I think obviously it's not as strong when it's RNG 50-50 whether you actually kill someone. Two-face in the making. But I still think this is a pretty cool card. Definitely would run it. At worst, it's still a 6-6 with flying and trample for 6 mana, which is more than good enough. Footlight Fiend. Only 1 mana, and it can be black or red. Already, I love this. When Footlight Fiend dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. So this is a great alternative to the Goblin with Rush that sacrifices itself and then deals 1 damage to any target. Because, honestly, when you're playing an aggro deck, when your creature dies, you want it to hit the opponent in the face. This is basically a 1-1 that causes your opponent to have to deal with it, because they can just ignore the goblin, whatever, it's going to eventually end up helping kill some creature. Honestly, the goblin might be slightly better, but I kind of like this fiend. I would run maybe 2 of them, maybe more, because what's your opponent going to do? Not bog them? Or, honestly, how are they going to get rid of such a useless creature that's still going to punish them for getting rid of it? I think this creature can see a lot of play, honestly. Next up, the Acrobat. 3 mana cost, could be 2 mana though if you activate the spectacle cost. So for 2 mana, 2-3 is pretty good. For 3 mana, I would say no. You can also activate for 1 mana that this creature gains Death Touch, which is pretty amazing. Or you could activate with red mana, Acrobat gets +2, -2 until end of turn, so basically it becomes 4-1. Which sounds pretty awesome for something that costs 2 mana or 3 mana. So I think this card is slightly underwhelming at first, but honestly if you can play a few of these for 2 mana, why not? Seems like a decent enough card. It can trade very easily with anything, or it can do 4 damage to your opponent's face if they have nothing on the field, basically causing them to have to deal with this. In general, I think this is the team of both the Footlight Fiend and the Acrobat. Your opponent has to deal with these cards, and maybe even more so with the Acrobat. Finally, the Rakdos Fireweaver. 4 mana and it's the difficult mana type, but still, when the Rakdos Fireweaver enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target opponent and 2 damage to up to 1 target creature. Or Planeswalker, though. So it's 4-3 for 4 mana, kind of underwhelming, but still decent enough. It can do 2 damage to your opponent's face, which is important when you're playing aggro. And it can also help kill a creature, so pretty awesome. Doesn't have flash, of course, so you can play this like an instant spell. I think I have a bit of residual Hearthstone in my DNA, because every time I see this kind of effect where you shoot at another creature and potentially kill it, I think about the Fire Elemental and how awesome it is when playing Shaman. So yeah, I think I irrationally like this card, but it can still be pretty fucking decent. Definitely would put 1 or 2 of these in my deck. Let's move on to Mono White, and honestly, if Mono Black kind of underwhelmed me, and also Orzhov kind of underwhelmed me, Mono White is in the same category. I was thoroughly unimpressed by the cards I saw, but these were the ones I did pick out. For Forbidding Spirit, for only 3 mana, 2 of which has to be white, so you would be playing this in mainly Mono White decks if you want to play it on turn 3. When Forbidding Spirit enters the battlefield until your next turn, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 2 mana for each of those creatures. Now, I think this could be misunderstood by a lot of people. I think this is an amazing card when you're playing against aggro decks. And honestly, not even aggro decks, it just delays your opponent by a turn. What are they going to do? Use up all their mana on turn 3 or turn 4? Just to attack you? Jesus Christ, how desperate do you have to be to end the game fast? Looking at you, Mono Red. And it's also a 3-3 creature, so at worst, it's a 3-3 creature for 3 mana. I think it's underwhelming that this was the best card in mono white for me, but still, amazing against aggro, can't complain. Pretty decent creature. So, 2 mana, Hero of the Precinct 1. It's another creature, 2-2 for 2 mana, already decent enough. Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a 1-1 white human creature token. I think this card is pretty funny, could be cool in Boros maybe, we'll see. But I would run 1 or 2 of these, because if you're trying to go white, maybe even in Selesnya, could be pretty awesome. So likely in Selesnya or Boros, this card can be pretty fucking awesome. Like a mini Legion war boss that doesn't have to attack with its 1/1s. It really depends on your deck construction, but I still think this card can be pretty amazing in pretty much any deck. Lumbering Battlement. What are these names? 5 mana, it's a creature, 4/5 stats. Not impressive honestly for 5 mana, but it does have vigilance if you care about that. When the beast enters the battlefield, fuck reading that name again, exile any number of other non-token creatures you control until it leaves the battlefield. Lumbering Battlement gets 2/2 for each card exiled with it. Now, this doesn't have flash, so you can't use it like an instant spell, but still, you're not actually sacrificing creatures. At first I thought this was basically a black card, like the guy that sacrifices creatures to get summoned more easily, that giant 7/6 creature, can't think of the name right now. But this card actually protects people. You can protect your tokens and force your opponent to deal with a giant fucking threat, and then you still have all your cards left. So 5 mana is pretty expensive, that's why I don't think this is an amazing card, but honestly, if you're not getting pressured, and might as well use low tier cards like, for example, non-token 1/1s like the Hunted Witness, that's a 1-drop, that you actually benefit from his death. I don't think this would count as a death, but still, it's a 1-drop on turn 5. How useful can it be? So, this Lumbering Battlement has some potential, I think. I think the main problem is the cost. 5 mana is pretty damn expensive. And I think this card, honestly, slightly reeks of a win more card. If you have the luxury of playing this card and abusing it to the fullest, I think you would have won anyway. That's why I don't rank it so highly. But could be fun. Finally, Angel of Grace, Mythic. Just pay attention to the fact this is a Mythic. 5 mana, 5/4 stats, honestly preferable to the 4/5. So it has flash, which is pretty cool. It's an angel, so it's flying. When Angel of Grace enters the battlefield, until end of turn, damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1, reduces it to 1 instead. Honestly, not impressive. Like, what are you going to do on turn 5? Not play this card? And just wait until you're almost dead? What are you going to do? Leave 5 mana open, and your opponent already thinks you have settled the wreckage at that point. Why would they attack with everything? This card just doesn't make any sense. But it's an angel, it has a cool exile effect, where your life total becomes 10 again. This is if, in the more likely scenario, you play the angel on turn 5, you trade with a couple of creatures, or you attack and then get traded. Then the angel dies, you pay a lot of mana, and you gain back crucial life. But still, so many mental gymnastics you have to go through to justify this card. I think it's a fucking disgrace. This card is a mythic. So unimpressive. Honestly, the Forbidding Spirit and Hero of Present 1, the 2 creatures we looked at in mono white, are better than the other 2, the high mana cost ones. Honestly, so unimpressed with mono white in this expansion. Okay, so next up we have Azor, or Azorius, whatever you want to call it, Azor for short, whatever. It's white with blue, and thanks to blue, white finally gets to have some cool cards. Blue, of course, is the color of evil and oppression and everything wrong with the world. Blue literally won this expansion for me, and we'll get into that right about now. So, Dovin's Acuity. I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it. When this card enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and draw a card. So 3 mana, already 2 life and a card for 3 mana. Pretty fucking decent, I would say. But also, it says, whenever you cast an instant spell during your main phase, you may return Dovin's Accuracy to its owner's hand. So, think of this like the, what's it called? The black and blue card. Oh, come on. This information campaign that constantly discards card from your opponent and draws a card. This gains you life and draws you a card, so against aggro decks, this card absolutely shits on them. They literally can't do anything to you unless they get a god hand and can just snowball you, and to the point where you can't afford to use 3 mana to play this card. But honestly, as soon as you stabilize just a little bit, this card becomes unstoppable. I think I might be slightly overrating this because you are paying 3 mana each time and your opponent isn't losing anything, you're just gaining some cards. But still, I think this card will see a lot of play, especially if aggro decks start fucking people up. So let's move down. Dovin Grand Arbiter. So first Planeswalker I think I'm going to look at. Legendary Planeswalker as always, there are no non-legendary Planeswalkers as far as I know. Only 3 mana, so let's see what he does. Until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on this guy. So, you basically gain 2 loyalty counters per turn as long as you're hitting your opponent in the face. Not too impressive honestly, it doesn't instantly affect the game, so I think that's kind of unimpressive. -1, create a 1/1 colorless top tier artifact creature token with flying, you gain 1 life. Pretty fucking weak as well. So the -7 is where this card has to pay off. Look at the top 10 cards of your library. Put 3 of them into your hand and the rest of them at the bottom of your library in any order. So when this guy gets big, you're going to look at 10 cards, the next 10 cards, and you're going to choose 3 of them to put into your hand. This feels like Surveil on fucking crack. I think if your opponent gets to use this effect, they basically outwin, because how bad does their deck have to be not to get 3 amazing cards out of those 10? And the best part is, unlike Surveil, you don't actually lose those other 7 cards, you just get them at the bottom of your library. So, amazing -7 effect, but you have to get there. So, we'll see how possible this is depending on the type of Azor decks that get run. Let's move on to High Alert. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Only 3 mana, another fucking enchantment. Creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender. Untap target creature as a special effect at the end. Jesus Christ, how much stuff can you stack into one card? Now, this entirely depends on how many amazing creatures with high toughness and defender you can get in your deck, but off the top of my head, there are a lot of those. So maybe the Azor decks that are going to get run are going to use this enchantment, actually all 3 of these cards, to set up giant walls, and then as soon as they play High Alert, those giant walls are going to start hitting you in the face for a bunch of damage that comes from their toughness, not their attack. So, pretty amazing card honestly. Entirely depends on the cards around it, but you can say that about pretty much any card. Senate Guildmage. This must be triggering the fuck out of someone's OCD right now that I just didn't go down. But whatever, Senate Guildmage. 2 mana, it's another Guildmage, so always going to be 2 mana from the 2 colors of the guild. 2/2 as always. And for 1 mana you can gain 2 life, or you can draw a card, then discard a card. Nothing to complain about, this card is pretty fucking good. Honestly, this card feels slightly better than Dovin's Acuity, because it's just a 2-drop, and it's also a creature, so it can block, it can basically gain you 2 life without paying anything, because it can block at least 2 damage. Drawing a card and then discarding a card feels like a red mechanic, but whatever. Pretty decent guild mage, one of the better ones I would say. Finally, Low Mage's Binding, only 3 mana. It has Flash, which is already amazing, because it's an enchantment. So Flash means it's basically an instant spell. I don't know what's the point of it being an enchantment, but whatever, whatever. Enchant the creature, it's just to make the card slightly weaker, I guess. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can be activated. So this is a better version of Luminous Bonds, and the fact it can't activate its abilities, that's pretty fucking good. It can also flash, so it can be used like an instant. Better Luminous Bonds on every single level, pretty amazing card, definitely going to get run. Now, let's get into the mill, I mean mono blue. Persistent Petitioners. 1-3 creature for 2 mana, already pretty decent. For 1 mana, target player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Pretty fucking awful because you tap your own card to do this. But if you tap 4 of these guys, target player puts the top 12 cards of their library into the graveyard. A deck can have any number of these cards. Jesus. I hope someone tested this, because just from reading this, this sounds fucking unfair. It's a 2-drop. It has 3 HP. It's not even easy to kill this. Jesus. Imagine a board with 8 of these. What are you going to do? You're just going to instantly get mute. I think this card might be a little too unreasonable, but it has to get tested out. How many of these would you put into your deck? Maybe like 10 of them, I don't even know. It's so stupid because you can block with them, so aggro decks, you can even survive some aggro decks using this card. Jesus Christ. I don't know, I think this is really fucking unreasonable. So, let's move on to something else exactly in this vein, because this seems like the mill expansion for blue. Thought Collapse. Jesus Christ. Another counterspell. 3 mana, as all counterspells must be. Counter target spell. Its controller puts the top 3 cards of their library into the graveyard. Jesus fucking Christ. Why? Why do blue get so many amazing cards? Why wouldn't you run this? You get to counter a spell, and then you also mill 3 of their cards. Jesus. This is so efficient, it's unreal. No reason not to run 4 of these in any mill deck. Wall of Lost Thoughts. 2 mana! It costs only 2 mana. 0 and 4, so just slightly worse than the 0 and 5 Defender Wall. But this wall, when it enters the battlefield, puts the top 4 cards of your opponent's library into their graveyard. 4 cards! Jesus! Have some fucking mercy. Imagine a deck with only those Persistent Petitioners in the top left, Wall of Lost Thoughts, only mill cards, and then Thought Co-ops. This sounds like a fucking cancerous deck, if I do say so myself. If I get some of these cards and looking at their rarity, Jesus Christ, everyone is going to be playing mill. This is about to ruin the game. Why wouldn't you though? Like, what's your opponent going to do? Also play mill? Jesus Christ, all of these cards seem pretty cancerous, so I'm definitely going to be trying them out. Now, let's move on to something that isn't mill. Sphinx of Foresight, 4 mana for a 4-4 flyer. Oh, it's not a flyer. My apologies. I just assumed because it's Sphinx it would be flying, whatever. So, 4 mana 4-4. Decent enough. You may reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, Scurry 3 at the beginning of your first upkeep. Oh, it is flying. My apologies. At the beginning of your upkeep, Scurry 1. So, let's just break this down. If you have this card in your opening hand, you get to pick the next 3 cards you draw. Why? Why does blue get all the broken toys? Why wouldn't you run this card? Imagine having this much of a power, and then when you actually play this card, if it manages to survive, if your opponent doesn't kill this card, every single turn you're going to get to pick if you want to draw your card now or later. Basically, a more overpowered version of Surveil. Again, why? Why does blue keep getting all these amazing fucking cards? Mass manipulation, I think this card is going to be overrated by a lot of people, but it is pretty fucking funny. Gain control of X target creatures and or planeswalkers. Why? 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 Imagine losing your planeswalker and your best creature because blue decided to spend 6 mana. Holy fuck. Unless I'm misunderstanding something, the minimum cost for this has to be 6 mana, right? So each X is 1. Or maybe I don't understand this card. Maybe if you play this card for 6 mana, you can just take their Planeswalker, so 1 card. I hope so, because if this card says spend 6 mana to take your opponent's 2 best cards on the field, doesn't seem at all fucking reasonable, does it? So, hoping for the best, but this card might be just as broken as all the other blue cards. Precognitive Perception, 5 mana, draw 3 cards. If you cast this spell during your main phase, instead scurry 3, then draw 3 cards. So, pick the next 3 cards if you like them and draw them, or pick 3 other cards from your deck which you constructed. Pretty fucking good. I know it's pretty expensive at 5 mana, that's why I haven't put it more to the left. But still, I don't see why you wouldn't run one of these. Why not? Why the fuck not? You're playing blue anyway. Finally, Clear the Mind, 3 mana, target player shuffles their graveyard into their library. Draw a card. It even draws you a card. So, because it says target player, that means you. So, if your opponent somehow fucks with your mill, for example, why not just shuffle all your broken cards back into your library? So, for example, if you're playing mill against mill, and you are getting milled, or if you hate mill, just put 1 or 2 of these cards in your deck, and if you ever get to play it, your opponent can't mill you anymore. And the fact blue has such a perfect counter to mill something coming from blue, I think is ironic, poetic, appropriate. Blue is fucking overpowered. Now let's move on to the weakest color in the game, something I wouldn't say is overpowered by any stretch of the imagination, and look at their cards. I'm talking of course about mono green, the weakest color in the fucking game. Biogenic Ooze, 5 mana, mythic, 2-2. So, 5 mana, but only a 2-2 creature, what's up, right? When the ooze enters the battlefield, create a 2-2 green ooze creature token. So for 5 mana, you get basically 4-4 in stats. Still seems pretty weak, right? At the beginning of your end step, put a 1-1 counter on each ooze you control. So this is every single turn. And also you can spend 4 mana to create another token ooze. I want to say that this card is slow and weak, but if this card gets out of control, it's going to be like that dryad that keeps summoning the little flowers that keep getting bigger with the ascension. And honestly, this feels even more powerful. It's also 5 mana, but it's so slow. It's not limited by ascension, it's not limited by being legendary though, so I think this is by far the best card for green, mono green, in the expansion. Definitely would give it a try if I get my hands on it, and once again I have no idea why this isn't legendary. Having 2 of these on the field doesn't seem very fair to me. So, End Race Forerunners, because the effect would stack obviously. End Race Forerunners, 8 mana, crazy expensive, but green is the color of ramp, so maybe it's not that much of a problem. I don't know. Vigilance, Trample and Haste, I guess you have to give it a lot of effects because it is 8 mana. When End Race Forerunners enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get 2/2 and gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So this is supposed to be a finisher, but I guess it's not too bad. Isn't that giant elephant that gives everything trample 8 mana as well? I guess this card is playable. Really depends on how much mana you have, and also if your opponent has any mana open, they can just nuke this. You also kind of need to have a board already for this to be amazing, otherwise it's just 7 damage, like not that impressive for 8 mana. This feels like a win more card, but it could be an amazing finisher as well. Really depends on your deck construction. I think the Ooze is more impressive, honestly. So let's move on to the next card, Gatebreaker Ram. 3 mana, 2/2 for 3 mana, feels weak, right? Gatebreaker Ram gets 1/1 for each gate you control. When are you going to have gates though? In Selesnya, I guess, when you're playing green. I guess maybe in Gruul as well. And it doesn't say this is a battle cry. It doesn't say when you play it, it gets 1/1. It's going to get 1/1 for each gate you have. So this creature can stack a lot of gates and get pretty huge. As long as you control 2 or more gates, the Ram has Vigilance and Trample. So I guess let's put it into the best case scenario. You pay 3 mana for this 2/2, and if you have 2 gates on the field, remember, they have to be gates, so you can't just use any special mana card. You have to use the slow gates that come in tapped. Okay, if you have 2 gates, it becomes a 4/4 with Vigilance and Trample. That seems like a lot of work for a 4/4 with Vigilance and Trample for just 1 less mana than makes sense. I think this card is slightly garbage, but we'll see. I just think, how often are you going to have so many gates, and why? Why would you have so many gates? I think this card is slightly too slow. Rampage of the Quans, 4 mana, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green center token. I mean, I guess, right? If you're playing against one of the old mill decks or one of the new Azor decks and they're fucking your life up with enchantments, or even the Rakdos just played that giant 7 mana spell against you enchantment, you can just destroy it and get a centaur for yourself actually, but giving your opponent 3/3 green centaurs, I don't know, dude, this card seems questionable. And you have to give me this. Look at the cards I put into the mono green pro column. These are the cards I'm highlighting as decent enough to mention. Imagine what the rest of the cards look like. Jesus Christ. Mono green is a fucking mess. Now, green on its own is garbage, but as soon as you put blue into something, it becomes overpowered. So let's look at the Simic cards next. I'm going to start from the bottom. Gyre Engineer, 3 mana, 1/1. It can add simultaneously 1 green mana and 1 blue mana. Very weird way to ramp up. I think there are better ways to ramp, but I think this is situationally good, so I'll give it the nod. Seems decent enough. Zegana, Utopian Speaker, legendary creature, already a minus. 4 mana cost, 4/4, decent enough. When she enters the battlefield, if you control another creature with a 1/1 counter on it, draw a card. So it just draws a card. Not too impressive still. If you pay 6 mana, this creature gets adapt 4, basically 4 more counters on it, so it becomes an 8/8. You're paying fucking 10 mana though to get an 8/8, and it's so slow. I'm going to have to say this isn't too impressive. It's a merfolk, but merfolks in general play fast decks. This isn't fast at all. And honestly, it's so easy to destroy creatures. This feels like a ton of investment and setup. just for this one creature. I don't know, this doesn't seem that impressive to me. Still found it impressive enough to put on the list though, honestly. Obviously, I mean. Uh, Applied Biomancy. 2 mana, choose one or both. Target creature gets 1/1 until end of turn. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Now, I think this card is good if you can pick different creatures. I have no idea why this card would pick the same creature when it returns the creature to its owner's hand. I also don't think buffs persist in this game, so it doesn't make any sense. So the way I look at this card, you're going to put a 1/1 counter on your creature and also bounce an opponent's creature to its owner's hand, or you're going to bounce your own creature when it gets targeted by something like a removal spell, and then buff up another creature. So I think this card is slightly gimmicky, but seems decent enough. Prime Speaker Vanifar. 4 mana, 2/4. Already in the Yikes column. Doesn't seem impressive at all. Sacrifice another creature. How black of you. Simic. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's converted mana cost. Put that card onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. Activate this ability. Yeah, when you would cast a sorcery spell. Makes sense. So what this card does is basically ramp very, very, very slowly. So this card is insanely slow, you already have to have control of the game, and I don't know why this card is even in green and blue, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Honestly, this card could have been in Orzhov, black and white, and it would have made so much more sense, but I think it's a cool gimmicky mechanic and I would love to try it out. Growth Spiral. 2 mana. Draw a card, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, the way I interpret this, pay 2 mana to draw a card and play a second land in the same turn. Now, I think this is a pretty cool card, I think this is going to get run. I don't know why this is a common, because I think maybe someone misunderstood what the card does, if they don't understand why this is amazing. Playing 2 mana on the same turn is pretty amazing because now you're in the lead mana-wise for the rest of the game pretty much. That's pretty fucking phenomenal for only 2 mana. And this card basically replaces itself because you draw the card. Amazing card, probably one of the best cards in the expansion, ironically. Now finally, let's get into the Biomancer's Familiar. This thing looks disgusting, it's a mutant, but still, 2 mana, 2/2, already decent enough. Activate abilities of creatures you control, cost 2 less to activate. Now, if you've been paying attention, and so some other cards in this expansion, a lot of cards have this new mechanic that Zegana has, Adapt 4, which costs, for example, 6 mana. If you have this creature on the field though, it's going to cost only 4 mana, and that's important because the adapt abilities are overpriced. So as long as you have this non-legendary mutant on the field, these abilities suddenly cost next to nothing compared to the effect they give you. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana an ability costs to activate to less than 1 mana. Fair enough, doesn't matter though. The next time target creature adapts this turn, it adapts as though it had no 1/1 counters on it. So you can adapt the same creature twice if you tap your mutant. Now, this doesn't seem like a good idea because you're wasting a lot of mana on one creature and you want to spread out your threat levels on different creatures. But still, if you are going to use the new adapt mechanic or a lot of expensive activated abilities, this new mutant seems like a must-have, and it makes perfect sense that it's rare. This card seems slightly too powerful, especially because I think it's going to stack. So, for example, Zegana costs 6 to adapt her, but if you have 2 of these mutants on the field, suddenly it costs 2. And that's pretty fucking ridiculous when you can tap one of the mutants and she can keep adapting again and again and again and become huge. So expect some trickery with the new mutant and the activated abilities. This card honestly enables the adapt cards so much more than they do on their own because Honestly, Adapt is a pretty slow and boring mechanic, and without the mutant, feels pretty weak. Time for the final guild in this set expansion, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be Gruul, red and green, the zero control guild. Sunder Shaman. It's a creature, non-legendary, keep that in mind. 4 mana of the difficult kind, but still 5/5. Sunder Shaman can be blocked by more than one creature. So the reverse menace comes in. Whenever Sunder Shaman deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. Jesus. So this guy is basically unstoppable by anything that costs less than 5 mana that isn't a removal spell. What an amazing creature, and it's not legendary. Again, I don't know why. Honestly, I have no idea why there's so many creatures that aren't legendaries that obviously should be. So, pretty amazing 4-drop. No reason not to run this in any Gruul deck. Quan Guildmage, another cool Guildmage. For 2 mana, target creature can block this turn. Feels pretty weak, honestly. Or for 3 mana, target land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature. With haste until end of turn. It's still a land. So, from my understanding, at the end of the turn, it turns back into a land. But if it doesn't turn back into a land and it just gains haste until the end of the turn, this Guildmage seems very, very abusive. But we'll see how this plays out. Now let's move on to another Planeswalker, Domri, Chaosbringer, 4 mana, 5 loyalty counter at the start. You need to get to 8 to get the big effect. So the way he's going to gain loyalty counters at red or green mana, if that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains Riot. Riot, I think, is one of the new mechanics where you either get a 1/1 counter on your creature or haste. Pretty awesome, to be honest, for a loyalty counter. Why not? The Riot mechanic on its own feels pretty weak, but with this Planeswalker, feels slightly better. The problem is, the first time you play him, on the first turn you play him, I mean, you're not going to get to use the effect unless you have a 1-drop in your hand, maybe. If you play him on turn 4, obviously, you can just play him on another turn and gain the effect. So his -3 is look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest of them at the bottom of your library. Pretty fucking awful, so I would say never use the -3. But if you get to 8 loyalty counters, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of each end step, create a 4/4 red and green beast creature token with trample. This doesn't seem that amazing, but considering you don't have to use this right away, you don't have to get to 8 and just use this immediately, because it's not that impressive. You can just get to 9, then you use it, and then you keep your Planeswalker, and you keep pumping the Riot mechanic. Honestly, slightly underwhelming for a Planeswalker, but I can see uses for this guy. Rhythm of the Wild. Enchantment. Creature spells you control can be countered. Pfft, amazing. Fuck all your counter spells, basically. Unless this gets counterspelled, as it's going to get, of course. Non-token creatures you control have Riot. They enter the battlefield with your choice of a 1/1 counter or haste. Honestly, this Rhythm of the Wild card feels better than the Planeswalker because it does the same thing but better. I see no reason not to use the Rhythm of the Wild in every single Gruul deck again. Gruul Spellbreaker, 3 mana, 3/3, already decent. Riot, this creature enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter or haste. Yeah, so this is the new mechanic. It also has trample as long as it's your turn, and Gruul Spellbreaker has hexproof. The hexproof part isn't that impressive because it's just on your turn, but still, it's a 4/4 for 3 mana. Why not? It also has trample. I don't see why you wouldn't play this card. Now let's look at the dual cards. Collision and Colossus. 2 mana, regardless of what you choose. Collision deals 6 damage to a target creature with flying, so basically kills the flying creature. Not a lot of creatures have more than 6 HP anyway. 6 is actually a pretty good number to hit in the air, so pretty amazing already for 2 mana. Colossus, target creature gets +4/+2 and gains trample until end of the turn. Pretty amazing, both of these effects are awesome. I see no reason why you wouldn't run a lot of these cards. Trash and Threat, 2 mana or 4 mana. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Again, pretty awesome because green cards that have green in them usually have a lot of power, so can be used like a removal spell. Why not? Basically another version of Bite, was it called? Why not? Or you could use Threat, create a 4/4 red and green beast creature token with trample. Honestly, for 4 mana, not that impressive, but if there's nothing to kill from your opponent, if they're not playing creatures, why not just get a threat immediately on the board? Feels good. Honestly, Gruul got amazing cards. I'm looking forward to playing Gruul in the new expansion. Finally, let's wrap this up with Mono Red. Honestly, I was disappointed with Mono Red as well. Not a lot of amazing cards, but some decent ones. So, 6 mana, enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, flip a coin until you lose a flip. For each flip you won, create a token that's a copy of that creature. Those tokens gain haste. Exile them at the beginning of your next end step. Okay, so this feels incredibly expensive and has quite a lot of RNG in it, but if you can get this to work, holy fuck, you're going to feel unstoppable, and there are going to be quite a lot of situations where you're going to get 2 consecutive winning flips in a row, and you might actually end the game off this effect alone. So, for the potential of this card, I say it's worth mentioning, and honestly, it feels like the best card in Mono Red. Now, let's move on to the Rix Muddy Reveler. 2 mana, or you can pay the Spectacle cost, which funnily enough is 4 mana. So why would you want to pay the Spectacle cost? When Rix Muddy Reveler enters the battlefield, discard a card, then draw a card. Feels like a red mechanic, if I have to be honest, so can't complain too much about it. And you get to pick which card you discard, so that's fine. If Rix Muddy Reveler's Spectacle cost was paid, instead discard your hand, then draw 3 cards. So, the way I look at this card, you can not pay the Spectacle cost on purpose, just to draw a card and discard a card, which is fine. But if this is the last card you're playing in your hand, you're going to get to draw 3 cards for free. It's like that legendary enchantment, or what's it called, story, artifact, no, what's it called? I don't even know, that's how irrelevant most of them are, except the one that makes knights and hits you in the face. Anyway, this card has an amazing effect if it's the last card you play from your hand, or you could just play it like a regular 2-drop and not be too upset. So this card has a lot of flexibility, which I like. Robo Reading, 4 mana. Destroy target land, Scurry 2. Honestly, I put this in because I think it's hilarious that it only costs 4 mana and you get to look at your next 2 cards, so basically more overpowered Surveil. You don't lose the cards. If you don't like them, you just move them away. I feel like people who play red might start using this card just to fuck with you. I think this card embodies the Rakdos mindset of fuck anything you're trying to do, I'm going to have fun, fuck your fun. So, final card of this review, Skewer the Critics. 3 mana, Spectacle cost is just 1. Skewer the Critics deals 3 damage to any target. So, if you can play this for 1 mana, and if you have 4 of these in your hand, for 4 mana you can do 12 damage to your opponent's face and just kill them. And I think that's worth having this card in your deck for, especially because what do you have to compare it to? Let's say the lightning bolt or whatever it's called. If you have a wizard, you can also deal 3 damage for 1 mana. It's comparable, obviously, and this is just sorcery, so it's slightly weaker, but to be honest, it's easier to hit someone in the face than it is to have a wizard on the field unless you're playing a wizard specific deck. This card feels more flexible, and honestly, you might surprise your opponent with a ton of damage out of nowhere, which feels pretty powerful. Honestly, it's just a common card, I'm just spitballing here, but I do see some potential in this card that's not just in a wizard's deck. And if you're playing a wizard's deck, why not put 4 of these as well into your deck? Now you can do 24 damage for 8 mana. Feels pretty powerful, doesn't it? If you guys made it all the way to the end, I'd like to give a thanks to you for some fucked up reason. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, share it, whatever the fuck people do these days. Leave a comment if I unfortunately missed a card or two. I probably did, to be honest. I just focused on these 50 because I thought they were exciting enough to talk about and honestly worth mentioning. I try to give examples from each color and combination because I think that's the fair way of looking at it. I could have just talked about the 10 best cards and ignored the majority of the cards, but that's not fun for anyone. So I'm looking forward to this expansion. I can't wait until the 25th of January. I have about 40k gold saved up, so I'll be opening a lot of packs and probably go back to streaming this game because I love card games, and this game in particular has held my interest for much longer than I assumed it was going to. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you on the next video, whenever the fuck that is. Bye.